Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Live It Today podcast with Greg and Stephanie Schlueter. We have a very special guest with us today. We're talking about a very consequential topic. Just to hold your breath for a second, but not too long. Join us every day with Live It Today at liveittoday.us just to know God's love and presence in this incredible journey of liturgy that our church gives us, to take that time every morning to be attuned to God's Word, and with a particular emphasis on marriages and families. It's been a great gift to many others. So join us, liveittoday.us. And Steph, what's happening September 8th?
Join us at Our Lady of Lourdes Parish here in Toledo, Ohio, for an outdoor Ignite on the birthday of our Blessed Mother. So 6:30 p.m., again, Our Lady of Lourdes. It will be outside. Obviously, if it's raining, we'll move inside the church, but bring a chair or a blanket, bring kids, bring neighbors, bring strangers, bring them all to the Lord. We'll have Eucharistic adoration. Confession will be available. Max, the infamous Max, will lead us in praise and worship. And yeah.
So CatholicRevival.us, absolutely free, but it's helpful to know. So let us know by going to CatholicRevival.us. Okay, so Drew Blazsik, Drew and Jesse and beautiful family and us were together recently at a wonderful family picnic. I hope you're absorbing, all of you listening right now, the graces of marriage and family and connecting. And I was blessed again to benefit from Drew's wisdom and insight. He is a professor. He's an economics expert, I would say. He's very attuned, particularly from a Catholic perspective. Mm-hmm. And what's most consequential, I think, is he isn't simply one who studies this. He genuinely has a value in understanding it and living it, and in the context of marriage, family, and home. So his wife, Jessie, the amazing Jessie, and 7 beautiful children. Their home is roughly behind ours. It's through the woods. Our daughter created a little pathway because such affection that our kids have for the Blazsik, as do we, but it's kind of sweet. One of them had created a path through the woods so that they could get more readily to their house. Anyways, Drew has written a book that he has submitted, so we're very excited that he is going to share with us some of the key ideas of this book called The Forgotten Sin of Usury. That ought to capture our attention. What? Usury? Sin? Maybe many of us don't know that. Byline, debt, labor, and the moral order of the family. So in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, open our hearts and our minds to know you all the more deeply, to love you with all we are, and to follow you, God, even in the most difficult of circumstances. Your wisdom is beyond compare. Help us to follow and to be guided by what you reveal to be true, more than what we just think is true. We ask this in your name through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. So just out of the gates, that is a key principle. Fides quorens intellectum is a Latin phrase that means faith, seeking understanding. The modern world has shifted that to understanding, seeking faith. I mean, how many of us are plagued by this? I got to understand it first. Now, they're woven together, faith and reason. They're meant to be woven together, and Drew is a great example of seeking to do that. But just for all of us, really, let's approach this conversation, what Drew is sharing, that the measure of it is not how difficult, right, or how popular, or what culture says. Let's really endeavor to understand what has Christ revealed with regard to these matters of usury, debt, labor, and certainly the moral order of the family. So, Drew, we just really want to benefit from your teaching. We have a short time here today. Tell us about this book.
So the purpose, I guess I can go with what the purpose of the book was. I've been studying, found it fascinating about the teaching of usury in the Catholic Church. And based on that teaching, you can really bring out the economic and financial teachings of the Catholic Church, which many churches do not have. They don't have those kind of teachings, and you can get very in-depth about it. Now, there's been many books try to explain usury, and in my purpose of this book is the first couple chapters, I do try to define it through scripture. I try to define it through encyclicals and the councils. And I do put St. Thomas Aquinas and some other saints quotes on it, but I really want to identify it through that. And then there's a pope in the 1100s called Pope Innocent IV that made the quote, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, and this is the whole purpose of the book, he said that if usury was permitted, or he said the reason why it's not permitted is because all evils would pursue if it was ever allowed. And he goes, it's a matter of fact, all evils would come from it. And he later on, and what we could talk about later, he defines also, he explains, and we can, in our modern day, view things such as, let's say, Bitcoin or things that are not productive. Like he explains that later on in that in his writings on it. So that's why.
Let me pause you for 1 second. I'm sorry. For those who have never heard this word before, presume, what does usury mean? What does he think it means? And is it different from what it means today?
So the most basic concept, and this is coming from, you can look at the Catechism of the Council of Trent, you can look at Vix Prevenit, it finds its place in a loan contract. So if you hand out a loan and you try to gain more than what was asked, so if you give me $100 and you ask for $110, you try to get interest, that's just the most basic form of it. The sin of usury. So if you ask for anything more than what you give out, St. Thomas talks about, like, if you hand out money and the person buys wine, he consumes it, it is his money now. It's his obligation to pay you back. And if he consumes it, you're charging money just for the use of the money. And I think that's the most basic, what you can look at it, how it is. Now that definition is very difficult to try to apply all financial dealings we have today.
I mean, the Vatican takes out loans probably, and dioceses and Catholic entities, right? I mean, they
now
take loans or lend loans with percentage, or so. Is there an issue there?
There's different contracts. Now we can get into that, and I do that in chapter 2. Is that can you? So I think we should, because we're short of time. I'm going to jump to the Fifth Lateran Council. The Fifth Lateran Council. I'm going to find the quote here. It tries to say there is just titles to a loan. So it mentions that you could have risk. I have to define what risk is. It's not risk like you think I might die tomorrow or I could do this or do that or whatever. Risk is a business activity that if I'm going to give you money for a productive reason, I should be joined to the profits of that venture. Therefore, if you made money, I make money. But I should join in the risk. If you don't make money, I shouldn't be able to use that loan to take your house from me, your property from you, and everything. That's the risk, right? If you don't do well in a business, I don't receive the profits, the fruits from it. And then you got expense. So this is what the Fifth Lateran Council says. Expense is a big one. So if you want to borrow $100 worth of gold and I have to hire, let's say, an armed soldier to grab the gold, well, it's a just title for you to pay for that, the expense. And then it talks about labor. We can get into that later, but
it's really good, by the way. Keep going. It's insightful. Labor
is very important because when we look at financial dealings, is there labor involved? Because many things, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm not there's things I purchased. Now, I think the intent is very important of why you purchased it. But if there's no labor involved, there's no work involved, I think that goes to the spirit of usury, where we want to gain profit and gain from something that doesn't have work involved. And you see that through wealthy, people, like, instead of doing some sort of work or true risk, they just want automatic gain and profit from it. And I think that goes into the spirit of it. But if you talk about the true definition, is the loan contract, the mutum contract.
Mutum, fun word. Sounds like Star contract. Wars term.
And I hate when that, because I always mispronounce those words when it comes up. But so it's just really, let's say I own property, and you see in the Old Testament, and then back then, this is what we have to understand too, and this is why our debt society is so wrong, is that back then we had people only borrowed because they had to pay taxes. They borrowed because they were starving. They didn't borrow because they wanted the latest, greatest thing. That's our debt society telling us that. Therefore, that's why they had the Jubilee, is because what was going on, if you they lend it out to people and they couldn't pay it back, they would lose their property. But in the Old Testament, they always got their property back, because man's property is for the virtuous life of the family. It's never meant to do that. So the sin would rest on the lender, right? But we can go later in it. Borrower also, I believe, has to do with some
obligation
and sin involved too in our society. But back then, if you're starving to death and you need to borrow, you're never guilty of the sin of usury. And if the lender is extracting more than what was lent to him, that's the sin.
Okay.
And the Council of Trent makes it clear. I don't have it pulled up exactly, but it says if it's a loan if you ask for more than what was lent out. I mean, in the most basic terms. And we have to clarify a couple things. Vix Prevenit was the last encyclical taught by the church.
Say that phrase again.
Vix Prevenit, 1745.
Oh, is that a Latin phrase, Latin word? Vix Prevenit?
Yeah, it's the encyclical name. And it was Pope Benedict XIV wrote about it. And in the beginning, he said the sin is found in the loan contract. He defines it. And he does go about just titles later on. But what he says, what we cannot argue, and some people do argue this, what if it's a rich or a poor man getting a loan? You can't argue that. It doesn't matter. It's still a sin. And you can't argue if it's small or great. And he says in the Vix Prevenit, a lot of times we think in our day and age, well, it's only excess, like heavy, large interest. Well, you can't define that. Like, what's large interest? Well, 10%, 9%?
A principle is a principle.
It's really if you're gaining profit, you're making money from doing nothing.
Yeah.
You can look at it that way. And if you get away from the actual strict definition, I think you can apply that to everything we do in life.
Yeah.
Am I trying to do things without work? Am I trying to acquire something without gaining stuff?
Or taking advantage of somebody else?
Let me ask a question practically, because we see AI that makes production. I interrupted you, Steph. My apology. AI world, which allows a tremendous amount of, shall we say, production and capacity with generally little effort. It takes an insight and knowledge and prompting and all that. And that is a key thing. Totally get that. But across the board, for instance, you're a professor, and even prior to AI, there were models of I record my lectures. And I benefit from people buying access to the lectures. The first time, of course, you did the work that corresponded to, say, a classroom. It might be an equivalent there, right? You do a class, and that first instance of people who see it. Is there an applicability, though, of that mindset that you now have a series that's online on YouTube, or maybe there's a funding model? Is there something wrong with the fact that 10 years down the road, it's proliferated millions of times? If that has happened, wouldn't that be great? But you're benefiting from work you're not doing because the video itself is doing the work.
Oh, like if you did a viral YouTube video?
Yeah, you had a video and people are paying for access to the series, but you've already done the work once, you've gotten paid for X, but it keeps, is that an issue that you continue to gain
think it
years down the road?
applies to this.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, if you're making money on money, like that, I think that's the stricter definition. I would argue and Pope Innocent IV brought this up. I know what you're saying if you go into that category. I would say, now I own Bitcoin. We talked about this, but and this is what Innocent said, the dangers of it is, what's the purpose of a productive asset? Well, it's for the virtuous life, because it produces food, housing, clothing for the family. And the family can't live virtuous unless we have those things. Murray Navarum talks about that. So if we pull our money, our investments out of something that is productive, that does good, and we put it into something which I have done, Bitcoin. Now, there's an intention and argument that you're protecting yourself, but let's say we pull all of our money out of it, all the wealthy does. And Innocent talked about this. Now the farmers don't have the money, and the productive assets don't have the capital to produce. So there's a danger. Now, I don't know if I would argue you did the work. If I produced something on YouTube and it was such a good video and it went viral, millions of views, I mean, that's just the model we have. You did the work. You're just producing because people like the good. It's almost like producing the iPhone and produce when everyone wants to purchase it. So I don't think that would be.
So it's not entering into that realm of actual work.
No.
Like this work is, if you will, worth its certain thing, but it proliferates beyond your working at that point. I mean, that's kind of a model I would say entrepreneurship. You want to create things that can continue to benefit other people while making money. But in some sense, I was wanting to clarify the nature of work itself, because really there is a mindset. What I'm hearing you say is, it's not inappropriate or immoral to create things that can continue to proliferate beyond your work and to benefit from it.
Not saying that at all. I would, let's more simple version. Let's say you have $100,000 and you could flip a home and you could have your family work on the home and you could spend time and make profit. But instead, let's say you live in the 1600s. You ever heard of tulip mania?
No.
Everyone wanted to buy tulips, and they became I'm not even exaggerating, like 40 times the annual wage, a tulip.
Wow.
It was speculation of what the tulip would produce.
Okay.
And let's say I see a tulip which does nothing for the virtuous life, doesn't produce anything, but it's all speculation. I take my investment out of that house. Now we don't have a remodeled house, and I'm purchasing something without work because I think it's going to appreciate over time. That would be the spirit, in my opinion, of usury. Now, some people might say it's just price, stuff like that. That's what it's talking about, is that's an asset that does nothing, right? It produces nothing. Gold does nothing. Money does nothing. It's sterile. And you know what's interesting? You ever heard of Noonan, who wrote the book on usury? He's probably the most famous Catholic.
I know the last name, yep.
And I put this in the chapter. It's really interesting. He puts those two sins together. It's contraception and usury, because usury is taking something that's sterile. Money's, Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle talked about, is sterile, and you're trying to make it productive when it's not. It's there to serve man and productive assets. It's created by man. And then man is taking something that's life-giving and tries to make it sterile through contraception. So he connected those two sins, and they come out at the same time period too. When you have high debt societies, people don't want kids. And it does it.
I'm going to pause you a second and say, if you have the time, we're going to make this a longer than a 30-minute program, and we're going to allow it to be full-fledged on our podcast platform in perpetuity. So if you've got the time, we're going to really flush this out and not limit ourselves to 30 minutes. Because I do want to ask the question, I think maybe in people's minds, there are those who are hedge fund managers, are really good with money, wealth management, and that's what they do, right? They're recognizing the capacity for money to somehow be multiplied through valuations and that sort of thing. And a good number of those folks have benefited major Catholic pro-life. Now it's gone in the other direction too, I understand that. But it has been productive in the sense of them donating or contributing. Hallow, I believe, is a lot of hedge fund managers set up by a lot of his friends, Alex's friends at Notre Dame, and is causing the incredible proliferation of this prayer app. We're not going to limit the conversation because we're mired in the present day thinking and situation. I want to be hit hard, and you bring that reality, Drew, which is why I want this conversation. I think it's important. What is the truth? How do we understand it? And let's not limit its sharp bite if necessary. But that kind of question is a question that maybe some people might have.
So if you want to stick to the strict sense, it's the loan contract. It wouldn't be usury, right?
Okay.
Now, some people delve into it. I'm going to read the Fifth Lateran Council, the true meaning of usury, what they use. And I love this. And this, I think, would make a lot of sense. Some people might argue that point, like New Polity down in Steubenville. They might argue, if you heard those guys, or the 401k or stuff like that, or you're just buying paper without any work. You don't even know what's going on with the company. I think there could be some truth there, but that's just so debatable, and that's the argument. Now, if we stick to the true sense, there's no argument here. Loan sharks, like you need to get that payday loan. That's usury. Easily, right? Credit cards. You're buying a consumable good. You're eating some. You're going out to dinner and they're charging you 30% interest. Right? That's usury. Now, if you're going, I don't know. So let me read this definition.
Yeah, please.
So this is the Fifth Lateran Council, and this is, I based my definition off, and I interviewed a couple people. I don't know if you guys know Brian McCall. He's a professor in Oklahoma University.
Tell us about your podcast midstream here so people can listen to that conversation.
I have Logos and Markets on YouTube, so I interviewed a few people on it.
Okay.
And I brought this definition. Do you like this? I always ask people this, and they say they love it. And so this is what the Fifth Lateran Council said. It said, the real meaning of usury, when from its use, a thing which produces nothing is applied to the acquiring of gain and profit without any work, any expense, or any risk. I love that. So from that, I think we have to judge our financial dealings based off this. And that's what I think this is the best definition. So you can argue. I'm going to give you a quick example, and some people might disagree with this. Let's take a mortgage, right? You get a mortgage. Is the bank committing usury? Now, back in the day, there were individuals that you can put up on trial, and they and maybe I got to make this clear too, that the Catholic Church in the 1300s and the councils, they said if you deny usury is a sin, you shall be punished as a heretic. And also, they said, if you're a convicted usurer or a notorious usurer, you shall not have a Catholic burial or receive communion. So it is
stuff.
a grave situation. Now, back then, it was a person giving the loan. Now it's institutions. So how do you put up an institution up, right? Mm-hmm. So let's think about a mortgage. Now, some people might disagree with this, but I think this is great. If you do a mortgage, don't you have to pay closing costs to the mortgage company? Don't you have to pay all that? That pays the labor and the expense. Mm-hmm. Is there risk? If you know how money is created in the United States, they are not lending out someone's deposits at a bank. A commercial bank is creating money through lending. That's how we work, the Federal Reserve System. So it's not like they could have used that money for something else. They just created the balance sheet on an asset and a liability instantly, and they just created new money. So there's no risk there. And then if you don't pay the payments off, what does the bank do? They take your house. They have the asset. They control the asset from something they never owned in the first place. So I would argue you already pay the closing costs. You already pay the fees. The underwriter, they need to get paid. All the lawyer, all that kind of stuff you have to pay. That's an expense, makes sense. But then it becomes a financial instrument where banks are trading and selling their mortgages. I would argue, right, that's usury in the strict sense of the bank is committing that. Now, the problem in our economic system, if you want to buy a house in 2019, let's say a $230,000 house, and you say, you know what, I don't want to get a loan and I'm going to work for 10 years and save, which I'm a big proponent of being a saver, and we can go into that. Why? The problem with that is that if you waited 10 years, because of our monetary system, prices skyrocket, you would be left in the dust. Therefore, our economic system promotes you to go into debt sooner. Mm-hmm. Because if you didn't, it will cost so much more.
Yeah. Or
a $30,000 car might cost $50,000 in how many years?
Right.
So you have an incentive to go into debt now, and that I think that's the whole the architecture of usury, why they built that in the system, for that purpose. So there's no condemnation. People have a mortgage, but I'm saying is the banks, are they doing it? I would argue, yeah, the lender is. Because the fees are paid, there's no expense, there's really no risk. It's not the risk that we're thinking of. And it's not a productive asset, right? You're not producing anything from the home. It's where people live. So then people might ask, well, how do you get loans? And I'm kind of jumping to my last chapters.
That's a great question. Yeah, keep going.
The United States Constitution says Congress should determine money. It is so simple for the public and private. Public can easily do this to have interest-free loans for homes. I'm saying that is a possibility that you could have. Now, I would have to go more in depth. We don't have time on this podcast to do that. But the point is, Congress has power over it. And what we did was we handed over money creation to banks. Banks create money. Not the Fed, banks do. So when a commercial bank gives you a loan, that's new money. When you pay off the loan, it distinguishes the money. It's gone. So they have an incentive to give out more and more loans. If they don't give out loans, there's no money. So it's kind of a weird economic system. And that's why we have laws that protect bankruptcy. So if I owned a business, I declare bankruptcy, who do you think are the first people that declare the assets in bankruptcy? Are the bondholders. It's debt. And then also you get interest free. So we have laws that protect debt. So I'm kind of jumping way ahead on it.
No, it's good. These are, by the way, folks, we are blessed to have Drew Blazsik with us here with Greg and Stephanie Schlueter, the Live It Today podcast, and obviously encouraging you to join us every day, liveittoday.us. And we're talking about consequential matters, consequential kingdom matters, and we don't want to waste time, if you will, with things that, if you will, everybody agrees with. These are some challenging principles in looking at our money and looking at our systems, especially with the rise of things like Democrat socialism. Check out a recent podcast we had about that. And we'll be continuing to have that conversation. But before we, and maybe in subsequent episodes, Drew, we need to talk about our current modern reality and the way people are looking at material matters and managing their lives, because that's a whole other layer of conversation. Are couples getting married, going in with two incomes in mind, which, if you will, forces them to think of alternative forms of their children being taken care of outside the home, away from their mom and dad, whole issues because of their economic mindset of how they look at things, a whole other area. But the infrastructure of this is an understanding of money. I wonder if you could just say a word. as you mentioned, this is a grave matter. 13th, 14th century understanding of church teachings that you couldn't even get a burial if you were a big user into usury.
A lender.
Lender, okay. So just if you could, tightly as possible, connect with us why our money matters in this regard, lending, usury. Why is it so immoral?
So we can go off Innocent IV when he said that all evils would pursue. Now let's look at, we talk about the lender. Now let's look at the borrower. And that's what I really try to narrow down on it. Think about what debt does. Debt creates a system where I want something today before I actually work. Mm-hmm. And so you might be out there and say, I don't do that. Like I'm staying away from that. Now, away from homes and mortgages, right? So, I mean, financially, it makes sense to buy a home in 2019 because prices went up by how much? You would have been out $100,000 when you saved about $30,000. So it makes sense to do that. But I'm talking about those small purchases on credit cards, those buy now, pay later models. Why do people have to have it? So what it does, it creates a spirit of immediacy. I want something now before I work. Here's a great example. If you hired your kid to do yard work outside and you paid before he did the work, right? You gave him money. He goes out to Kroger, buys some stuff. My kids love going to Menards now and Kroger, ride bikes. They spend it. And then a week later, they're like, hey, you still owe me some yard work. Now he's going to hate work. He's going to, oh, my dad, why are you making me do the work? Now, if you did the other way, you said work first and then I'm going to pay you later. Work becomes more enjoyable. You actually, you're working towards something now. But here's the key. If you had to labor first for something before you bought it, there's something malinvestment. Are we putting things into things that shouldn't be there because of they talk about with our monetary system, but with credit cards, does the same thing. You truly don't understand if you truly need it until you have the money and you work for it. Because if you look at it and you're like, oh, I can do payments, become a society of payments, not price. Right? I want, this is going to be $50 a month. I can do that. And we become a people of payments. We're not truly understanding, is that good worth it? Now, if I had to labor for 3 days straight to buy that good, now I'm going to truly judge that good. Was it really worth those 3 days? So debt creates that spirit of immediacy. We want it today. And then Pope Francis actually talked about this. He said a throwaway culture is more and more that we want these goods immediate. That means when it breaks down, we throw it away and then we're just going to buy a new one instantly, right? It's cheaply made as it was 100 years ago. Goods aren't made as well. And it's all based on that idea of having it before you actually labored, I believe.
No, I love that.
And there's some research I put in there that talks about it. So it just creates that mindset. I need it today before I labor. And I think it's so important. Why don't we labor? And look at the moral order of how God created it. Man was made for labor in the garden, and you must labor before you enjoy the fruits. Debt reverses that order. I want the fruits first. Now, most people probably say I don't do that, but a large percentage, I mean, what is it, 4.5 trillion credit card? I forgot what it is.
Something
a lot.
Something crazy.
I think that's great to frame it. Greg, you did this so well with our kids too as they were growing up in framing, how many hours of work to purchase, whatever it was that was either a need or a want, right? But to shift that mindset of it is the work that goes into it and is it worth it, or is there something else, or just connecting the two. Whereas like you said, Drew, it's like this immediacy that we have fostered in our society, and then we think about it later or work for it later.
There's another, if I could just add here too, the foundation of all of this, it seems to me, is that all we have is given by God and made possible by God. And he blesses us, to make it super simple. He is the blesser. And the purpose, the telos, the end of being a blesser, is that we in turn are blessers. He blesses us to be blessers. So my talent, my gifts, my resources, my time, there's ought to be a mindset of, God, you gave this to me for what purpose? And there's a hierarchy, right? Like survival, my wife, our kids, our family, the world. And I think I love that you get into somewhat of the psychology, the anthropology of the thinking of debt and how the structure affects the way we think. That is so important. The deeper thing maybe is, are we fostering a mindset of all is God's, regardless of the economic system? Am I using what God has given me in a prayerful manner? Should I be going and buying something at X, Y, and Z? Like my kids all the time, and I do think they're very giving. God has blessed them in different degrees. And often I will say, well, that's great that you wanted this or did that, and I will be like the gnat maybe, and not too often, but just every once in a while I will still say, did you pray about that? Like, was that meant for something else? I think one day we will stand before God and he will show us the incredible capacities he gave us. And he will show us maybe what the other choices, a more selfless choice might have resulted in. Maybe it's poverty in another part of the country or in our neighborhood, subsidiarity and all of that. Like that mindset, God, you blessed me to be a blesser. I know your family is that way, Drew. And honestly, I think that promotes this sense of I'm cooperating with God in the gifts he's given me to build the kingdom. All right, continue.
And I would say, so off that spirit of immediacy, what does it create also? If you need something in the here and now, you're not looking at I call it the eternal horizon. You're not looking you don't look for eternity. Debt doesn't do that. Society looks at immediate today. What's the pleasure today? So therefore, children are something that are very difficult and hard, and it pays off into the future, right? You see how they grow up. That's why a debt society, and it's proven over and over, they don't have children. Death society doesn't have children, and they don't think there's a fear of the future. I don't have the money. And part of the reason, too, is think about it. If I start buying those buy now, pay later, I got this mortgage, I got this car I shouldn't have got, right? It's way more, but you know what? It's really nice. And you put everything into a payment. That means you're booking out your labor in the future to pay off your pleasures that you did in the past. So everything was immediacy, and you're working for that.
Say it again. I mean, that rolled off your tongue. And you're saying a lot of very insightful concepts here, but repeat what you just said about the future and the present.
So if I do it again.
Yeah.
So if you are constantly looking for today, and I'm trying to think exactly
putting off the future.
You're putting so
future in
if everything becomes payments, and you got that 10-year more, I don't know, 8 years. I know you could do car loan and all this, and I wanted that Escalade, and it's $100,000, whatever. You're putting all those payments. That means your labor into the future must pay off your pleasure that you wanted in the past, especially those things like cars, which are depreciate and go down in value, or the whatever it is. But it definitely makes you want the pleasure today. And think about all the sins that come from that. I was going to write individual chapters on it, but that might get kind of boring. Food sins, where you just want the pleasure, not thinking about what's the purpose, the primary purpose of it. You have family and sex. It's always the pleasure before the actual purpose of family. You have so many things that we always want, and I'm guilty of this. Like, instead of exercising, I want that energy drink, right? No labor. I don't want the work, which exercise gives you the energy. Instead, I want that energy drink. And I do that, so I'm not guilty of that energy drink.
Well, the new proliferation
I'm not innocent of that.
And the new proliferation, which we're learning, we'll have to do a whole episode on. What is the drug people are taking? For weight loss,
yeah,
which is cash. You're writing checks that cannot cash on the whole human body in terms of your mind, heart, body, soul. People who are thinking of an easy way to lose weight instead of doing the work and have a healthy lifestyle, it is having a huge effect. Anyways, I love where you're going. Keep going.
So, I mean, debt does that. Claims on your future. Right. And you're kind of a slave to that's what a bond is, like debt, a bond, your bondage to something. And if you're bondage to something, they own you. Now, even think about this, is the more debt we have, the more tied we are to our job. And if we have another COVID situation that pops up and we're afraid to say something and get fired, the less likely we are to speak out. If we are families in distributist sense, Catholic economics, that we own productive assets, which I don't even care about the corporation or the government, I own things, I would never be afraid to speak out. Right? We're afraid to speak out because we have this massive debt and we're controlled somewhat by corporations, because you have to work. If you didn't, you're going to lose your house. You're going to lose everything because you don't own it. Because we're not a country of, I would argue, we're just a country of debt.
I love what you just said there. And for all of you who are listening, he used the word distributism, which I think really became popular, clarified by Chesterton, I think, and many...
Belloc.
Okay, Belloc. And maybe, okay. Worthy of looking into, because there's a deep reflective Catholic sensibility there about this order. And by the way, these are conversations, just so delighted that we're unpacking this as much as we can. But all of you who are listening, maybe these words are just swimming past you. Invest in understanding the implications of the way we think about money, about how it's structured in our society, and how the decisions that we make and our attitudes truly have concrete repercussions for healthy living, for living the abundant life. That's my summary, and we're going to keep going here, but just hang in there, right? For some of you, this is terminology and ideas like, I get my check and I go and I pay things. We're dealing on center stage right now with economic models are at stake, and connected to them, we're seeing a view of a social structure that is either atheistic in a lot of ways, or it acknowledges God and his order. I might even be more simple. You don't even need to be a believer per se. I mean, it dignifies the order. But if we go to the Greeks, right, there is an order that we need to recognize that is for the good, objective good of the human person. And that is fraying at the seams. And Drew here, an economist, a professor, has written a book on this. Again, I'm going to repeat it: The Forgotten Sin of Usury, Debt, Labor, and the Moral Order of the Family. By the way, he has submitted this for publication. It is not out yet, but mark it, write it down: The Forgotten Sin of Usury, Debt, Labor, and the Moral Order of the Family. He's trying to unpack it and communicate it in simple terms for us, because we can't just sit on the sidelines. This has deep, meaningful implications for kingdom think, kingdom building, for this world that we are all called by virtue of baptism to participate in building. Go ahead.
And then we can talk more theology on this. Is if you look at Christ when he's on earth, he didn't have the glory, the resurrection. He had the suffering first. He went to the cross and then the resurrection. And if you look at when man was put in the garden, it was cursed, because now labor is somewhat suffering. So we can't reverse that and have the pleasure before we do the work. That's contrary to the gospel. We must suffer first and then be glorified in heaven. That's so important to see in that. But that's what debt does. It kind of reverses that moral order of the family, right?
That's so good. Never thought about these things. Keep going. Love it.
But Fulton Sheen, I remember watching this a long time ago, and this is a great insight. He said on his TV show on YouTube in the 1950s, he said, isn't it interesting, because he always kind of dwelled on suffering. He said man's capacity to have pleasure does not last long at all. Pleasure only lasts and if you have too much of it, it becomes suffering. So pleasure does not last long. And then he finds it so fascinating that a person who doesn't think they could suffer for decades with like disease or whatever they have a capacity to suffer so great. What's the purpose? Is because it should point to eternal things, heaven, which is the pleasure, right? Heaven should point to that. That's why earth isn't made for that. And that's why a debt society creates immediacy, and you don't look for the eternal horizon because you want the immediate pleasure today. It just creates that, and you might not even think about it, or you might not even be a high debt person, but it creates that in society. And our society is a debt society, our monetary system. And we can get further into our governments that way. What do we have? 40 trillion in debt? Crazy. Everything is debt. Yeah. We want something, and politicians have a whole chapter on it. Politicians know have a politician, everyone agrees we need to cut the deficit. Once a politician gets specific on it, they get kicked out of office. You always have to towards people's pleasures. And it's so connected with that, but it just creates that when we reverse the resurrection before the suffering, the crucifixion, it reverses it. And I think you look for earthly things. I
got to pause you just for a second and invite our listeners, as well as myself, to consider whom are those that we look to as really living the life, right? We're aspiring, if we had what they had. It's why people buy lottery tickets. It's why we, have our glam magazines, or people get online and they're looking at other people and they see these lives other than themselves. Ask the question of those who are, if you will, the culture-defining Hollywood elite, moneyed people, and ask the question, and it's not the case in every instance, but the percentage of that class, how many of them are in stable marriages? How many of them are free from drug abuse and some of these things? How long are their life expectancies? The data is right in front of us. The glam, the Luciferian fruit being offered to many of us, if we're really honest and say, where is that getting them? We can see the answer. And I might say to this, punctuating, there's nothing wrong with making money and making a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with using our gifts and talents. It comes back to this principle. Are we using it with a view towards Christ? Do we recognize our value? There your treasure is, right? Like if we're seeking God and we understand the transcendent gift that he's made us to have souls for his indwelling spirit. For those who get that, they're living in a wealth beyond measure already. But you're really punctuating and I think challenging all of us maybe to calibrate our desires. Like, we're in a world, postmodernism, deconstructionism. We've seen the destruction of the last decades. We see institutionalized gender confusion and all of this thing. And the worst incidences in recorded history of depression, despair, suicide, and all that is wrapped into this. You're getting at a quality of how our desires wired when we get that magazine, when we get that invitation and online to buy this and buy that. I think a key insight is, how is my soul responding to this? And when I have partaken of it, am I really happier? When I bought the new thing, I like stuff. I like electronic stuff. You and I did. There's a guy with his cool sports car or whatever. We have friends who can afford those kinds of cars. And I know after the fact, it's cool, but it dissipates very quickly. Are our souls and desires rightly calibrated to the true good of the human person? And the beauty of you, Drew, and this work is that you're getting at the heart of that. And honestly, if we're attentive, the great gift of wisdom is the only hope for a restoration of society, I think, in electing the right people who are going to communicate this boldly and invite people to experience that wealth. Keep going.
So a lot of people might say, we have large families or listen to this, doesn't pertain to me, all that. What I really wanted to open up in the book as well, we need politicians to change the laws and try to have better public policies to create. If you want to think about our government either creates strong government or strong corporations. But we should look at Catholics, how do you build strong families? When I mean strong families, where the father owns productive assets. We own things, where that's what we want to look at. Now, so we talked about how it creates immediacy. Now, we can see it. Research after research shows the more debt, the lower population people want to have children. The more debt people have, there's not as enough children are happening. What a great sin that is. Also, there's research that shows the more debt you have, you're not as good as a father. You're more upset, things, because that you owe something and someone has it over you. And if you can't pay it or you lose your job, it's going to be devastation. Divorces are because of debt and finance. Like, it destroys families. The research is pretty overwhelming on it. But if you look at the loss of an inheritance, if you had to ask the average person what is an inheritance, I want you to really get this picture. Imagine the average American dying in their deathbed, and all they did was save all this money, and they have it in a 401k, millions of dollars. No one ever used it or even seen it. It's put away some way, and they're dying, and all they do is hand paper to their kids. Is that really a Catholic inheritance? It destroys inheritance, what we think inheritance is. Inheritance should be, first off, the faith, inheriting the faith. And it should be that you're inheriting a skill that you use your money, your resources to produce a productive assets that you teach your children, and they learn from you, and then they have those skills and move forward. Not the idea of just handing a bunch of money when you're dead. And most people don't use their 401k. They die. I mean, they might use a little of it. So I argue that a productive property and the loss of inheritance becomes from this debt society and how our economic system looks at retirement and how we look at things. And Chesterton and Belloc saw that too. They saw that if we become a nation of wage earners, that means that's all we are. I hand out my wages and we don't own things. Like, we think owning is just a house. No, they want you to own product. Thomas Jefferson was big on that. Small farmers owning things, not big corporations that own everything. Yeah. That's a huge thing. We kind of lost that idea of what true inheritance is.
Let me pause you just on that point, because in the modern world, you're speaking of something that's more than just, I go to Best Buy and buy stuff and I own the cool things, gadgets or clothes, if it's a woman, maybe a guy too. I don't want to prejudice that, or cool cars. That's not what you mean when you say own things, correct?
Productive property. You own, let's say, a workshop. You own a wood,
a capacity to produce.
You own farmland. If you look at 100 years ago, what it would take for someone to own something like that. And Chesterton would argue this. He would say it should be easy. The government should be set up. If you have the capacity to produce, you have the hard work, that you should own the farmland to produce for the common good for the people in your community. Once you take that away and all we own is our house, we get to pay off 30 years, right? We're not what Chesterton Belloc would say, we're just wage earners. That's all we are.
By the way,
I got the capacity to produce.
Got to give a shout out to Austin Mass and Mike Giannetti boys down in Bowling Green, uniting families, seeking God's will, Catholic faith in their church, and it seems that they are sincerely about that. I mean, you're more familiar with what they're trying to do, and it seems at some point we'll have them on this conversation because I know that they're really endeavoring to live some of these principles. Yes,
they're looking to get, and I argue in the book that the IRS should make this capacity for tax-free money or company match tax-free money that we have in our 401k. They're looking to acquire money through investors to buy local property productive stuff to earn an income off of that. And I argue we need that as a policy as well.
That's awesome.
Now, and I want to get this point, and this is so clear of Pope Francis talked about the throwaway culture. That we want something. Hey, don't worry. You could put it on a credit card. And this sounds so weird. I love saying it this way. We should love our goods for what they are. Like if you own a car, we should love it for what it is. And we should take care of it. And a lot of times you think of how people handle things, they don't love it for what it is and they just throw it away or they just could get a new one. Or what would we do? We outsource our labor because it's cheaper in these high debt societies. It always happens this way. Someone makes it cheap in a foreign country. We want cheap because we're just going to throw it away. We have that immediate mentality. We don't look at, I want to buy this good and hand it down to my kids that lasts a long time. We just look to purchase something. Look at the furniture in my house. Is it going to last? Back in the day, it did, right? Because a couple things, it wasn't just built cheap, it was built by your neighbor. When you build something, you have productive assets, you have a more of a love for that good that's you want to hand down to your children. Now, what I try to argue in the book, and the throwaway culture also gets rid of the eternal horizon, as in, look how churches are built today. They're built in a way where they have to get remodeled and things have to happen. They're not built to last. And they're not built to awe people. Way back in the day when they built churches, it could take hundreds and hundreds of years. So the laborers were building something that they would never see. They were building something for their children and their children for God. They're building for God. And once you get rid of, if you want it, immediacy, once that spirit comes in, you're not looking to build things for the future. Therefore, what that naturally does, you forget your past. What happens? You throw away the traditions that you had because you have everything new. You could just buy it like everything just easily. You could buy new. We're always looking for the new thing rather than, whoa, what did the church teach? Maybe that's why it's the forgotten sin of usury, right? We forget what it is. And then that happens. Just look how they built the cathedrals.
Yeah.
And they didn't buy it on debt. They didn't say, oh, we got to do this in 30. They looked at everyone put their, if you had a skill, you were participating. If you're wealthy, you're putting money into it. But it wasn't for your generation necessarily. It's for the generations to come.
You know what's unique in this moment? We've lived here for 13 years and been blessed to interact with a number of business leaders. And we see some of these ideas taking hold among those who are sincerely asking these questions. But a bit of a shout out, but also to showcase some of what you're saying here. The McNamara's and American Crafted Furniture, Archbold Furniture. It's not just this place on Airport Highway that is new and selling awesome furniture in partnership with the Amish in some respect and all that. Their kids work there. I mean, how awesome is it that in their home, they fostered a culture of faith woven together with industriousness and caring for people and caring for things. And they are undiminished in their proclamation of Christ. Like right below their sign is "In God We Trust." Father Nathan Cromley, phenomenal leader from this community also, who articulates these principles. But there's a standing example of somebody, of a family that it's not just we want to make money and pass this on to our kids. We see the treasure is forming them to be able to use their gifts and talents and skills to support their amazing families, their kids and grandkids. We're blessed to see them in church and different places. But that's going to reverberate through generations as they continue to bless people in this community. There's a kingdom model. I might also say the Cronins, Rich and Connie, Perrysburg Auto Mall. I'm sure they maybe struggle with lending and all those sorts of issues. They're just, it's part of the culture, how they have to deal with that. But their love of God and bringing that into their culture and how much people have been blessed and benefited. Charlie works there. beautiful marriage, new baby. I mean, they give evident witness to the kind of culture, if you will, that we could have if we absorb some of these ideas that you're saying of, I want to live this first and foremost. I want to create a culture in our home to form our children, and the overflow from those banks to this community in terms of the ways both of these families and many others, but those two, reach others is truly amazing. And what you're describing, I think, is very much some of the architecture idea.
They're perfect examples. How do we get those examples into the average Catholic family? Right now, they're really good examples in that, but it doesn't have to be such a big business either. It could be whatever skill set you have. And I would argue in today's world after COVID, I mean, look at this equipment here. I got equipment in my basement. I could do stuff. People are finding ways their skill set that they can actually own assets. You know, you put money into it, and then you actually have a skill from your home that people will say, wow, that's valuable. And I think if we go more towards that, that's like the idea of small-time farmers in today's world, that if we can get more of that. So, I mean, those two families are perfect examples of that. But how do we get that into the average Catholic home, which is very difficult in our system, right? Yeah. But no, the perfect example.
But you as a father, you have, 7 children. They're younger than ours. Your oldest is kind of younger than our youngest, our 6. But you're getting that idea that this really is what happens when you have a family that's living what it's meant to live. Praying the rosary, going to Mass, dad and mom involved, really attentive to their journey in life, which we know is a challenge. But you're doing it, and I see we could have a whole conversation about this, but in this community, just want to say if you're endeavoring to do it God's way. And let's face it, every day it's hit and miss. But, we're seeking God's grace. And the communities, like when we were together this past week with these other families, these conversations are being had. I just want to say that to people out there. This is not just theoretical principles that have no bearing on human existence. We're seeing young families and those up to those our age who get these, have done the fight of seeing alternative views and recognizing this is not simply ethereal theology, right? This has a bearing on livelihood, is a bearing on living the abundant life.
I think a good example is like your own child, Dominic.
Yeah.
Because Dominic he loves running.
Yeah.
And he took that and he had to buy some assets, right? He had to buy some stuff.
After using mine, yes.
And after he used and abused it. And he used that, and now he has a skill set, and he learned that. That's just like a perfect example that you can do in today's world. Yeah. So it's not just owning a storefront company or having a lot of passing that millions of dollars down, but you can teach that not to go into the corporations, I guess, not to go into that world. You can build your own skill set and own your own business much easier probably than any time in my lifetime.
Yeah, there's a key,
which is a great thing.
There's a key thing here that I think to parents listening right now. Where's the joy and delight in work? Like really, if your kids are not forged with the joy and delight in work, probably it's because they haven't come into an awareness that God made them for a purpose and that he's put that in their desires, where their desires correspond to what they're good at, and they can get paid for it. Those 3 things. You have a desire, something that you really, interests you, that you're good at, that you can cultivate, and that you can get paid for. If we forge them to understand, that's kingdom language. Like there's rightly ordered to God. Joseph, same thing. We had guitars around the house. We played piano, got him involved in worship.
Those are assets. You think about.
Showed him the runway.
You could produce.
Showed him a runway. First 3 songs as a recording artist are #1 Billboard hits. And people look at that and they're kind of, how do you, whatever. I'm not going to say our kids aren't special, but every kid is special. Every family, parents are entrusted to a culture that is the home that is unsurpassed in its capacity to rightly forge them with a compass for the kingdom for eternity that isn't just some other day. It is living in the present moment of vitality, of knowing who God is, whose they are, living it out, and living their gifts in this world, working in a way of partnering with God to make it happen. And the joy and delight of them being able to say, work is work, right? They call it work, it's work. But in general, to wake up every morning and saying, let's do this. I get to do what I'm doing. How many people say that? We need to forge our children to know that God made them for that. And circumstances may be different in different families, but are we forged our kids that way? You're doing it with your kids. Cronin's, McNamara's. Those of you who are listening, another conversation about how we form our kids and homeschooling and school choices and all that. But it does tie into this question of, are we giving them the right mind and heart so their desires are rightly ordered to the good?
Yeah, and I think it's really not just doing that, is investing in them to like buy things to invest. And I have a section in here, and I'm really debating it, and I think I'm going to do it, is I own Bitcoin. Why not sell some of that Bitcoin? And this is a perfect example of families can do. I have the summers off because I teach. Why not take $8,000, buy some riding lawnmowers, buy a trailer, and start a lawnmowing business, which is really not too much risk involved. You can teach your kids work, and then you pay yourself back from the funds, and you could really make it successful. And there's so many creative ideas you could teach work through that, but it does need investment. It doesn't have to be a large investment. Like podcasting, you spend, I don't know, $1,000 maybe. Right. It doesn't have to be a lot, but there are so many opportunities, and I think that's so important. And I think with homeschooling too, because we have 2 kids go to school, the rest are homeschooled, you guys are homeschooled, is that it does create creativity. Homeschooling, when you're not sitting down all day listening and you got to do this, that. If you could foster creativity, that's so important, especially in the age of AI. That AI really helps out creativity, I think. But
if we partner with it well, there's dangers there, of course. I know you agree, but just to use it well and understand how is it a tool.
It makes students I see stupider or a lot smarter.
Yes. Well put.
If you're using it just not to think, but if you're thinking and then using it as a brainstorming, it's very powerful. Or help you do certain things, or legal, or whatever it is. I mean, it's pretty powerful. But whenever you guys are ready, I'm ready to get into the biggest users.
Lay it out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the United States government.
Woo-hoo.
Okay.
So the last couple chapters I talk about this is, think about the debt that we have. We have $40 trillion in debt. It's debt. Is it off of productive reasons? Barely. I mean, most of the things they spend is just consumable goods. I mean, they're the biggest users. The monetary system, which I already explained, is creating money through debt. That's how money's created. You have to have money if you want liquidity. So when debt dries up because things go bad, and that's why liquidity dries up. That's why you have these booms and busts. When things are going great, banks are lending to everybody. Too much money, inflation happens. That's why it happens, right? But let's look at, I like to think about war on this regard. If we lived hundreds of years ago and a king had to, we know just war theory. If a king had to go to war, he would have to see the cost. And we talk about that. When you go in debt, you don't think cost. You just do things, right? And you just buy it. If they went to war, there was, okay, this is going to cost, let's say the lords and people they have to tax and all that. There's 3 ways to tax people. You tax people directly, which they used to do. We know what happens. You have shorter wars. You have less wars. Then they had something called the central. I have a whole thing about central banks. Central banks lend money and they have a monopoly on money, but they lend it to the government. Then all of a sudden, after that happened, you see these wars going more frequently and they're lasting longer. And then you have the most scary one of them all, which is the system that we have today. They tax you through inflation. They don't directly tax you. They don't say this war is going to cost you $10,000 worth of gold and we must do it for the safety of our citizens. They just say it's going to cost you, okay, my taxes, they actually give me a tax cut. And we don't see it happening. All prices go up because of it. And they tax you through inflation, and we don't even see it happening, and we don't question it. So this is my point on this, is that when they argued the first Iraq war in 2002 or 3,
okay,
I have the numbers somewhere in here. I got to find it.
Georgia's war, yeah.
And they estimated it was going to cost $50 to $80 billion. The war was. So we're like, okay, well, if it's not going to directly, like, nobody really thinks of it. Well, the war happens. Were we really thinking, is this war just through a Catholic lens? I'm not going to argue that, but were we really thinking that? Well, Brown University did a study a few years back. They estimated that $50 to $80 billion war. How much do you think it's cost so far? And it's estimated through how much the soldiers need medical issues through 2050. They estimated, and they included Syria in here, $2.89 trillion for the war. So if you do that math and you look at how much that really costs per citizen, that's like asking every household, I forgot, $22,000 to $30,000. You're asking every household to pay this amount of money for something. So we don't really understand, is it just? And we're never looking at a war just because they inflate it through prices and we never see it happening.
Yeah.
So it commits those evils and we don't know what's going on with it. Is it lasting too long? I mean, if you just look at the Afghanistan war, how many years? 20 years we're in it. I don't know what the cost was and all the soldiers that died in it. And then what happened at the end, we pull out and just give them all our weapons. And you know why they gave all those weapons back?
Because Hillary and Bill needed to hide. I don't know. That was Obama. That was under Obama's watch.
But why would they just let them why wouldn't they ask for it back? Because then they have to go to Raycom and they issue billions of dollars more to produce more weapons. It's more money right back to those manufacturers through debt, through inflation, through all that. And they do it all the time. I mean, if you look at the costs. So we never get a real good... So through our system, through usury, we don't get a good idea of what they're spending money on. It could be war, it could be anything, because we as citizens never hold them accountable. And we never really think, was that really worth it? Because it really never came out of our pocketbook. But I saw one study, now this might seem crazy. They said in today's world, the average city, you're living in poverty unless you make over $140,000 as compared to 10 or 20 years ago.
Wow. That's short of a time.
Why did that happen? Is because the government is, and maybe I just got to mention, what is inflation? It's not prices going up. Inflation is inflating the money supply. They grew the money supply so large and prices going up was a result because of inflation. That's different. If you have a disaster, say a tornado, that could cause prices to spike. That's prices going up, right? But inflation has increased the money supply. That's different. That causes all prices to go up in food and everything.
So just a commentary from the common man here sitting on the sidelines with some familiarity. We're talking about a disconnect from money from the human person and what its essential purpose is and our connection to it, that if there was a greater connection of our responsibility and what money really is, we'd be more judicious. We'd be more moral. We'd recognize some things may merit, like let's just say, as you put it this way, what if every American was presented before the war in Afghanistan or whatever, here's the bill, $22,000, and you decide to either yes or no, pay this bill before we go to war or not, and we don't go to war. What's going to happen in that scenario? That's a responsible view of every human. We get this when we manage our own households. Like, right, we get whether usury or debt or credit cards or all the rest, at some point it comes to roost that a father is going to say, I got to pay my bills because my credit rating is in the floor, or whether there are implications for a lack of responsibility. I could get kicked out of my house if I'm not responsible in paying what my bills are. There's a direct connection of my management of my money and implications. Seems to me at least a remedy is how can we help awaken consciousness of Americans to know there is a personal responsibility. It does have an effect, whether you see it or not. And it does translate into the moral life, the spiritual life.
It's just, you would have to, I think the only way to correct it, you have to change the monetary system. So my purpose is to awaken people to think that we actually need public policy change, because we're never going to see that. We think, if you ask the average citizen, they think inflation is natural. It is not natural to happen. If you look at the 1800s, a house in 1810 to 18, it was very similar, which means you could have labored. I want you to really get this kind of picture in your head. If your grandfather labored and he worked hard, and then he gives you, let's say, the house and it's worth the same, or the gold. Let's say he saved all his gold and he's held on to it. Well, it's worth the same as it did before. What they're doing now with money is your grandfather's work. They're taxing his labor. He made $10,000, we'll say $5,000 for the year. They made it so pathetic. They taxed it. They took rid of it because it's worth nothing today, right? Actually, if you don't mind, I can get in a little history, and this may make a good picture. In Roman times, you ever heard of like debasing the currency? They did a couple things. They would mix the metals. Let's say you had a gold coin, silver coin. They would mix it with nickel and stuff like that. Or they clip it. They'll clip it. But no, think about what happens. You guys know, familiar with 1964 quarter was all silver. 65 was what we have today. So what do you think happens? It's called Grisham's Law in 1965. What happens in circulation of the 64 quarter? It comes out of circulation. You keep it because now they're worth $5-6. And 65 quarters is all you get. Grisham's law. Bad money is what happens. Good money's taken away. So back to the Roman times, when they clipped coins, everyone's like, this isn't worth that. I'm going to hold on to the old money. But you're protected because you have the old money. That makes sense?
It's an asset. It's a real physical asset.
But, yeah, they couldn't tax your gold. Because the only way they do it was forcefully go into your home, which FDR did in 1834. They made it illegal for Americans. But anyways, but in Roman times, you had that gold that was worth, even they debased the currency, what you did last year was still worth that. So you're protected. Now think about the fiat currency we have today. A dollar bill in 1970 is the same as the dollar bill today, which means now they can inflate it just like they did before. They can debase your currency, but it doesn't just take what they do today. They're taking what they did they're doing it to your grandfather, what he worked yesterday. And they just totally took it all. And what does that do for people? It makes us say we have to put our money into risky assets and we have to do speculation to keep up with what they're doing with our money.
Yeah.
And and back to the question. The question that you said was with war and all that. If they came back to us and they said $30,000 was the wars, there would be revolution in the streets. No, it would not happen. We would not pay it. And they know that. And that's why wars back then were shorter and quicker, less death. And that's why the 20th century, we've seen a lot more bloodshed, longer, and just drags on because we just don't know what's happening. So I think people got to get upset.
There's a pause.
They did that to our money.
Yeah, there's a huge pause that we ought to have, in a sense, in this moment. I mean, this moment in history, this moment as we look at these circumstances. You have and are marvelously unpacking the connection of a monetary system and our attitudes and desires and how they have direct implications. I keep repeating it. Worthy of, again, all of you who are listening to try to grapple with some of these ideas. And I'm very excited about this book coming out, and I hope that it is accepted, The Forgotten Sin of Usury, Debt, Labor, and the Moral Order of the Family by Drew Blazsik. And you're with Greg and Stephanie Schlueter on the Live It Today podcast. We're going to continue the conversation here and hope, again, I'm going to give you an email if you have want to interact in any particular way, and maybe we just continue. Certainly go to liveittoday.us, our podcast, and add your comments there, because we want to foster conversation. We want to be open to truth. We want to be open to what is the verdict of history and our Catholic faith on these matters, because it is something we need to, especially to your point, Drew, if we're interested beyond ourselves, if we're interested beyond even our children, if we're interested in our children's children, and we recognize that is playing out right now, the shape of their world is playing out in decisions we're making today, we got to be informed. We just do. We got to be informed.
And I was at some political, there's some guys who were running for Senate a few years back, and I don't want to say his name, but I remember I walked up to him and I said, They all have, if you ever listen to them, they all have the same talking points about spending in debt, but they never cut spending in debt. None of them do. And we all know that. They all say that. And the foundation of all our debt is the monetary system. That's the foundation. Why? And especially after 71, there's no tie to anything like gold. And I brought it up, and they just kind of like laugh it off, and they just say, I don't know about that. But when you hear people talk about it, it's like the government is addicted. It's like the person who's addicted to drugs, and the drug dealer is the one's making everyone addicted. The Federal Reserve is the drug dealer. Unless you deal with the monetary issue, it is so hard to stop that addiction.
Yeah.
On that. But
good analogy. How about your final part of your book, Drew? The home, the hearth.
So I do go into laws, I think, to strengthen the family, because there's a lot of economic encyclicals, which are awesome, beautiful, and they talk about the family as the institution, the number one institution. Then you got government. Corporations are not really listed as important, but government's important, but family is as or greater, the encyclicals talk about, as in an institution for, but government's very important too. And I want to say, how do you strengthen the family? I'll tell you a quick little story on this. There's a guy, I won't say his name either because he's running for office, and he gave a talk. And after the talk was a family morals, or what do you call it? Family. It's all about the family he's talking about. I was like, that's kind of interesting. So I walked up to him, and in the 70s, Ronald Reagan passed the no-fault divorce law. And that
One of the biggest tragedies.
That was the biggest one. But you have to go, that's the foundation. You have to correct that. You have to eliminate, you have to, all the states adopted it. So we have to repeal that law. Because if you want to cheat, right, you should lose everything. It should be that. It shouldn't be no fault divorce. So I walked up to him, a big family values guy, and this whole talk was about it. I said, hey, what's your thoughts about no fault divorce? I think we should eliminate it. And that's the foundation. And he looked at me blank. And it looked like he never thought about it. And he goes, I don't know anything about that.
Oh,
and he's looking at me like, and he's been in the Senate. He's been in the Senate in Ohio for a long time.
Wow.
And then someone swooped in and tried to interrupt me real quick. I was very upset about it, by the way.
Yeah.
And that was so telling that politicians don't really have the perspective of the foundation what caused these issues. And they're not doing it.
Let me pause you and have your train of thought. Those of you who are listening, I respect you, Drew, for confronting respectfully public leaders who, by the way, I wouldn't fault you for naming them, because they are representing the ideals that we are either supporting or not supporting. You're connecting dots here and you're pressing them for integrity, without which they can just package noble ideas that don't translate into what's under the hood. And in my opinion, I wrote an article this, GregorianRant.us, integrity. What are the words we're using? What are the things we're standing on? And let's not get lost in the eloquence and, the way in which, the manner in which people maybe draw us in by their passion or whatever. You're getting down literally into the weeds, seeing the weeds, and you're asking for clarification on that. And it's unfortunate that that's falling apart. Keep going.
Oh, fine. I'll name him. It was Macaulay. He's running with Vic.
Okay. All right.
And he was in the Senate for so long. Okay. I was just blown away by that at the breakfast the prayer breakfast.
Okay.
And he knew the audience. So he knew there was a bunch of religious and he was talking about it. And I just I'm tired of speeches. Mm-hmm. I'm really tired of it. There's issues that they could do and they don't touch it.
Yeah.
And when he had that blank look, either he didn't have the talking points or he really didn't know anything about it. And I don't understand why everyone knows about that. I thought in politics, kind of obvious, but anyways, so if you talk about the hearth or the family, we need to restore property back to families. So Belloc said, if we do not restore the institution of property, we cannot escape restoring the institution of slavery. There is no third course, Belloc talked about. And Chesterton talked about it was stolen away from individual families over the centuries or last, let's say, 150 years on it. So I have a couple of ways to think about. One thing is, I think this is so easy. Trump could order whoever's the head of the IRS, order to change the code and make it much more easy that if I work for a business and they give me a company match and they give me tax-free money, instead of going to globalist companies, and I want you to think about it, if you give it to BlackRock and they own a company, they have voting rights in that company. Therefore, you give up your voting rights, and you want to know why all the global companies think the same is because they have your 401k and we're investing in it, a Vanguard. Anyone out there, go to who are the 3 biggest owners of every single U.S. company?
BlackRock,
State Street, BlackRock, Vanguard.
Yeah.
And there might be another one in there. And they're owned about 10 to whatever percent. They're the number one voting rights, and that's why who owns BlackRock? BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. It's all owned by those 3. What we need to do is reverse that and give it back to individuals and communities. So we should be able, instead of investing in these funds, which are contrary to our faith, I should be able to use that to purchase a rental property, purchase a home I could flip. It does a couple things. It puts money into the community. Like, the IRS doesn't need to know exactly what I'm doing, right? Let me buy my own money and do some investments. And also what it does, think about it. Instead of me going to work all the time, like I told my boys, and even my girls might want to get involved too. I own a home. Let's sell it in a month. Let's go do some labor together, learn how to do a floor, learn how to do this, learn how to do that. There's a lot of families do that, but we don't have the financial capability, and most people don't have to do something like that. Why not give our 401k that we could buy assets in the community? It'll benefit the community and it'll benefit our families through work. And that goes back to that. I think that's a huge one. I know I talk about housing and zoning. We absolutely need to increase the supply of homes. I think there's too many restrictions on that regard. I'll get to the last chapter, but money as a measure, not a master. I list 2 or 3 alternatives to our fiat money system. Number one, I want to people to talk about is called the Chicago Plan. And there's a paper written in 2012 by Michael Kalmoff from the IMF and the Bank of England. And I was in communication with him. I might interview him pretty soon. He wrote a paper and then he revised it to make it more simple. The Chicago Plan was believed by all the economists that back in the 20s because they hated the Federal Reserve System. And what happened was after World War II, the debate shut down, and now it's just every nation's a debt monetary system after World War II. Chicago Plan, we need to correct that. Nothing for you to buy a car and you want to save and then buy it later, you have to make sure it's not inflated from 20,000 to 50,000 in 15 years, right? That's the monetary system doing it. We have to correct that so the car is still worth the same. And really, those TVs, a lot of prices should go down because of technology. But why are we getting this increase? It's because of prices and restrictions. And the last one I would say, and this is what I ended the book with, it's called The Architecture of the Hearth. Did you guys know, not to put you guys on the spot, there is one, and this is what a lot of conservatives might get mixed on. Money should not be used as a private good, as in a market good. It should be by the Constitution, Congress. It's controlled by government. The king would put his money, his face on it. Did you know there's one public bank in the United States? You guys ever heard of this? It's controlled. People can look it up. Very successful. It's called the Bank of North Dakota. It's a public bank. Meant the deposits of the state are deposited into this bank, and the bank only benefits the people of North Dakota farming, and they can issue lower loans to help out people and businesses. It's not a socialist idea. It's because money should not be a private matter. It shouldn't be commercial. It should be the government, technically, and because they should issue it. I would argue that this is very possible that we can, with private and public help, that, and there's some restrictions and safeguards, that families should be able to purchase a home interest-free and use the savings that would have went to interest into investment funds that could buy public or private property, productive property. So how does this work? If you buy a $400,000 home with today's interest rate, how much interest do you think you're paying for 30 years?
A lot.
Over 450 or 80,000. So you're buying 2 homes. So the bank got a home on something they created out of nothing because they have a monopoly from the Federal Reserve, and there's no risk. You already pay the costs. You already pay the upfront costs. So they're paying that. So my argument is they should give families, if they live in the home for 10 years, should be a lot of restrictions on it, that they should own the home either very soon in 10 years and then use those funds to buy property. Because if I had an extra $450,000 within that time period, we could own a lot. And we could have more creative ideas on it. I think that is the home is where it starts.
Of course, that's going to beg the question, to what degree does the government restrict or guide something that is so personal, which is to say, if you have discretionary assets or you do acquire additional money, all of us could say it could be invested or used in a beneficial way, but who decides, right? And honestly, this is I realize that needs to be worked out and how it's structured in a way where there's maximal individual discretion. But most people today, and this is perhaps a key underlying issue, is do people have the integrity or character or vision of these principles that we're talking about, the nature of money and the nature of how we, have self-mastery and surrender immediate desires for greater things for our kids and in the future. That vision to me is the driving, if you will, dare I say, engine of, regardless of the economic system. I love and appreciate how you're saying the implications are, because most people are, let's face it, they're weak-willed. They go with the flow. They don't really exert. Those who do exert themselves do very well, who say, I can master myself. I don't need to give in to this immediate desire. I'm going to save money. I'm going to be judicious in how I invest it for the purpose of advancing what I'm meant to do. But those principles have to correspond to whatever structural order we may see.
You could put restrictions, but I would argue that even if someone was careless with their money and they bought consumable goods, that's better than a bank producing billions and billions off of something they didn't work for and they created out of nothing. They have it through the government. That would be better. Like Fair they point. Had to buy stuff. But you could easily put stuff in that you have to show that money went to something that some kind of land or something. You could easily do that. And I got that idea. I just want to bring this up real quick. The Franciscan in 1462, the friars, they started something called the Monte di Pieta. You ever heard of it?
No.
So they realized that, and this is before the council or the Fifth Lateran Council, but this was after some other ones that talked about the sin of it.
The mountain of piety.
And then what they did was they created a system. If you needed a loan, it was interest free. And then the argument was, well, they have all these other costs. They had to charge some costs, but not interest to make up that. And then that's why the Fifth Lateran Council was actually had to question, is that legitimate? And they said it was. If there's costs involved, you're allowed to charge it. But anyways, they had that idea, and it lasted hundreds of years, that people through private donations got interest-free money. And they could, and they just had to repay it. And so that is a Catholic thing, which was very cool if you look it up. And then it kind of went away. I believe it was in the 1800s. And it was Pope Leo X who approved it. He did the Fifth Lateran Council. But through our system, the government, the public can easily do that. And I looked it up. If you look at the amount of money they give interest-free loans to corporations,
which is crazy.
Instead, give it to the families. Yeah. So that's the thing. Instead of building corporations, and we talked about this, what does capitalism create? Capitalism, if it's, and the popes never, you have to identify what you mean by capitalism. If it's that the capital has the preeminence over labor, and that means the money flows and you see the wealthier get wealthy. And that's what we see with the billionaires and the trillionaire. What happens is it creates a social fabric that you need socialism. So in extreme capitalism, if it's unbridled, right, and everyone's getting wealthy, the poor don't own productive assets, therefore the government must have a social system to pay for them. If the system's built on families, not corporations, not government, families, and you build up the wealth of families, you will never have that issue. But the problem is, corporations need labor and government needs people addicted to the government. The families, a strong family, as we know, politicians would hate.
Yeah.
So it must be created through subsidiarity. We must have laws that local communities must have the power, not centralized communities. And the popes could, I don't know if you guys know this, but in Rerum Novarum, it might have been Quadragesimo Anno, but he said it is a grave, I'm trying to think exact words, have it in here, but it's somewhere in here. A grave disorder or a grave sin if you have centralized powers doing things that smaller local communities could do. So if we can do things, principle. If a family could do something, a local, easily take care of it, and then we have centralized communism. We have centralized stuff in the United States big time. Yeah. The Pope called it a grave sin. It's grave order with this, what's going on. And subsidiarity, I think that's another principle.
100%. Drew, this has been an invigorating conversation. I must confess, in the supply and demand nature of the human body, I am needing to respond to the call of nature, and I may be regarding that this is a conversation that needs to continue. I think I encourage all of those of you who are listening, listen to it again and again. If you go to YouTube version, you can get the transcript. I will try to link to this in the show notes, but I think there are fundamental principles here that are worthy, in fact, imperative that we understand and engage with the implications of the things that, Drew, you're speaking of. And I'm so grateful to you for this. The book that we hope is going to see the light of day, The Forgotten Sin of Usury, Debt, Labor, and the Moral Order of the Family. I want to give you a final word here, Drew, knowing that we're going to move at some point. We're going to recover, pick up on this conversation and continue, because it's got to be more than just an episode that we have an aha moment and move on. This is infrastructural. Like, this is kingdom infrastructure considerations, weaving. Word became flesh. Logos became sarx, became logos. We need to understand these things and really wire ourselves correctly in forming our kids' desires and the way that they live, and subsidiarity and community, and all that is extremely important. So final word this time.
Final word is it starts with the individual. We should have a plan not to go into debt, right? And train our kids to work and then purchase. That's what it starts with. Then it starts with the family, that we need to think about what we want to give an inheritance to our kids. And it's not just money, it's the faith. And think of a skill that you have, and you could really bring your kid along to learn it. I think that's so important. And then we need politicians to go out there to do Catholic principles, subsidiarity, and we need a new monetary system. There needs to be pressure to do it, because if we don't do that, there's definitely not a big outcry with politicians. And if it ever happened, I think that would be there'd be a massive battle, because there's a lot of wealthy people make money because of the monetary system, and there's no work involved. They're not producing anything. They're taken from the productive class. And finance, I teach finance, but really finance it's can be like Vegas.
Yeah.
It's just gambling.
Yeah.
And we see it all the time. So I think we need a lot of public policy, a lot of changes. But it starts with the monetary system. That's where we have to start.
Folks, you are tuned into the Live It Today podcast with Greg and Stephanie Schlueter. This is the longer form version. We're delighted that you hung with us, and we encourage you to please click that bell if you're on YouTube. Substack is its foundation. Check it out. Please share it and have the conversation. Share it with people, because I think it's the kind of thing we need to talk about. Please check us out, liveittoday.us, our daily Live It gathering reflection. It's very impactful, and we do invite you to please consider joining us for Ignite on September 8th, catholicrevival.us. It's free. Our Lady of Lourdes Shrine, a very beautiful evening of reverent worship and praise, Jesus outdoors at that beautiful shrine that we have here in Toledo, Ohio area. Drew, blessed to have you in our community, blessed to have you as a friend, and very grateful for you and what you're doing with this project. Again, The Forgotten Sin of Usury, Debt, Labor, and the Moral Order of the Family is a book we pray is going to see the light of day, and we will let you know. We'll keep you up on that. We look forward to having you back and continuing the conversation. Until next time, God bless you.
Thank you.